Chapter 2 of the Holy War. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Joy Chan. The Holy War by John Bunyan. Chapter 2. When the giant had thus engarrisoned himself in the town of Man's Soul, and had put down and set up whom he thought good, he betakes himself to defacing. Now there was in the market-place in Man's Soul, and also upon the gates of the castle, an image of the blessed King Shaddai. This image was so exactly engraven, and it was engraven in gold, that it did the most resemble Shaddai himself of anything that then was extant in the world. This he basely commanded to be defaced, and it was as basely done by the hand of Mr. No-Truth. Now you must know that, as Diabolus had commanded, and that by the hand of Mr. No-Truth, the image of Shaddai was defaced. He likewise gave order that the same Mr. No-Truth should set up in its stead the horrid and formidable image of Diabolus, to the great contempt of the former king, and debasing of his town of Man's Soul. Moreover, Diabolus made havoc of all remains of the laws and statutes of Shaddai that could be found in the town of Man's Soul, to wit, such as contained either the doctrines of morals, with all civil and natural documents. Also relative severities he sought to extinguish. To be short, there was nothing of the remains of good in Man's Soul which he and Will-be-will sought not to destroy. For their design was to turn Man's Soul into a brute, and to make it like to the sensual sow, by the hand of Mr. No-Truth. When he had destroyed what law and good orders he could, then further to effect his design, namely, to alienate Man's Soul from Shaddai her king, he commands, and they set up his own vain edicts, statutes, and commandments, in all places of resort or concourse in Man's Soul, to wit, such as gave liberty to the lusts of the flesh, the lusts of the eyes, and the pride of life, which are not of Shaddai, but of the world. He encouraged, countenanced, and promoted lasciviousness and all ungodliness there. Yea, much more did Diabolus to encourage wickedness in the town of Man's Soul. He promised them peace, content, joy, and bliss in doing his commands, and that they should never be called to an account for their not doing the contrary. And let this serve to give a taste to them that love to hear tell of what is done beyond their knowledge afar off in other countries. Now Man's Soul being wholly at his beck, and brought wholly to his bow, nothing was heard or seen therein but that which tended to set up him. But now he, having disabled the Lord Mayor and Mr. Recorder from bearing of office in Man's Soul, and seeing that the town, before he came to it, was the most ancient of corporations in the world, and fearing, if he did not maintain greatness, they at any time should object that he had done them an injury. Therefore, I say, that they might see that he did not intend to lessen their grandeur, or to take from them any of their advantageous things. He did choose for them a Lord Mayor and a Recorder himself, and such as contented them at the heart, and such also as pleased him wondrous well. The name of the mayor that was of Diabolus's making was the Lord Lustings, a man that had neither eyes nor ears. All that he did, whether as a man or an officer, he did it naturally, as doth the beast. And that which made him yet the more ignoble, though not to Man's Soul, yet to them that beheld and were grieved for its ruin, was, that he never could favour good, but evil. The Recorder was one whose name was Forget-Good, and a very sorry fellow he was. He could remember nothing but mischief, and to do it with delight. He was naturally prone to do things that were hurtful, even hurtful to the town of Man's Soul, and to all the dwellers there. These two, therefore, by their power and practice, examples and smiles upon evil, did much more grammar and settle the common people in hurtful ways. For who doth not perceive that when those that sit aloft are vile and corrupt themselves, they corrupt the whole region and country where they are? Besides these, Diabolus made several burgesses and aldermen in Man's Soul, such as out of whom the town, when it needed, might choose them officers, governors, and magistrates. And these are the names of the chief of them: Mr. Incredulity, Mr. Haughty, Mr. Swearing, Mr. Whoring, Mr. Hard Heart, Mr. Pitiless, Mr. Fury, Mr. No Truth, Mr. Stand to Lies, Mr. False Peace, Mr. Drunkenness, Mr. Cheating, Mr. Atheism. 13 in all. Mr. Incredulity is the eldest, and Mr. Atheism the youngest of the company. There was also an election of common councilmen and others, as bailiffs, sergeants, constables, and others. But all of them like to those aforenamed, being either fathers, brothers, cousins, or nephews to them, whose names, for brevity's sake, I omit to mention. When the giant had thus far proceeded in his work, in the next place he betook him to build some strongholds in the town, and he built 3 that seemed to be impregnable. The first he called the Hold of Defiance, because it was made to command the whole town, and to keep it from the knowledge of its ancient king. The second he called Midnight Hold, because it was built on purpose to keep man's soul from the true knowledge of itself. The third was called Sweet Sin Hold, because by that he fortified man's soul against all desires of good. The first of these holds stood close by Eye Gate, that, as much might be, light might be darkened there. The second was built hard by the old castle, to the end that that might be made more blind, if possible. And the third stood in the market-place. He that Diabolus made governor over the first of these was one Spite-God, a most blasphemous wretch. He came with the whole rabble of them that came against man's soul at first, and was himself one of themselves. He that was made the governor of Midnight Hold was one Love no Light. He was also of them that came first against the town. And he that was made the governor of the hold, called Sweet Sin Hold, was one whose name was Love Flesh. He was also a very lewd fellow, but not of that country where the other are bound. This fellow could find more sweetness when he stood sucking off lust than he did in all the paradise of God. And now Diabolus thought himself safe. He had taken man's soul, he had engarrisoned himself therein. He had put down the old officers, and had set up new ones. He had defaced the image of Shaddai, and had set up his own. He had spoiled the old law-books, and had promoted his own vain lies. He had made him new magistrates, and set up new aldermen. He had builded him new holds, and had manned them for himself. And all this he did to make himself secure, in case the good Shaddai, or his son, should come to make an incursion upon him. Now you may well think that long before this time, word, by some or other, could not but be carried to the good King Shaddai, how his man's soul, in the continent of universe, was lost, and that the runagate giant Diabolus, once one of his Majesty's servants, had, in rebellion against the king, made sure thereof for himself. Yea, tidings were carried and brought to the king thereof, and that to a very circumstance. At first, how Diabolus came upon man's soul, they being a simple people and innocent, with craft, subtlety, lies, and guile. Item, that he had treacherously slain the right noble and valiant captain. Their captain Resistance, as he stood upon the gate with the rest of the townsmen. Item, how my brave Lord Innocent fell down dead, with grief some say, or with being poisoned with the stinking breath of one ill pause, as say others, at the hearing of his just lord and rightful prince, Shaddai, so abused by the mouth of so filthy a Diabolonian as that varlet ill pause was. The messenger further told that after this ill pause had made a short oration to the townsmen in behalf of Diabolus, his master, the simple town, believing that what was said was true, with one consent did open Eargate, the chief gate of the corporation, and did let him, with his crew, into a possession of the famous town of Mansoul. He further showed how Diabolus had served the Lord Mayor and Mr. Recorder, to wit, that he had put them from all place of power and trust. Item, he showed also